Welcome to the deep dive. We all have brilliant ideas. We draft these incredible plans. But let's be honest, execution is often the thing that just kills us.
It really is.
So today, we are really ripping apart the playbook of those who don't just dream, but actually build.
That's right. Today's deep dive, it's centered on the principles of turning vision into, well, visible reality. We're synthesizing from influential strategies and, most notably, the foundational tactics from the art of the deal.
Okay, and the core thesis here, it's strikingly simple, but difficult to really internalize. The biggest difference between potential success and, permanent mediocrity isn't creativity or capital. Ideas are utterly cheap.
Oh, yeah. And the sources are pretty ruthless about this point. The graveyard of potential is just filled with magnificent plans that never saw the light of day. Ideas are safe. They don't require you to risk anything, really. Wow. Execution. That's the dangerous disruptive element. It's the ruthless act that separates the endless talkers from the actual builders.
Right. So our mission for you, the listener, is to unpack the mindset that transforms a promising blueprint into an empire. We're going deep on discipline, the ruthless control of resources, and the requirement for relentless action. We're analyzing the strategy of aggressive execution.
Because your vision means absolutely nothing until you deliver a result. Execution is defined by that delivery, happening while everyone else is still debating the ideal font for their, executive summary.
Yeah, polishing the plan instead of doing the work.
Yeah.
We have a famous, almost mythical example of this from New York City. The complete fiasco that was the Woolman Rink reconstruction.
Yes.
This perfectly contrasts bureaucracy versus execution.
It really does. For 6 years, the city bureaucracy tried to repair the rink. They missed every single deadline, wasted millions of taxpayer dollars, and it became this kind of national punchline. Just a spectacular display of planning paralysis.
Total paralysis. Then a private developer, in this case Donald Trump, he stepped in. He told the city he'd finish the project in 6 months, a promise everyone just laughed at as impossible, right? Given the history.
Impossible, they thought. But he executed. By cutting through all that bureaucratic red tape, leveraging private resources, and, demonstrating decisive leadership right there on site, he finished the project in 5 months.
5 months.
Under budget and ahead of schedule. That is the definition of execution. Getting the result done faster and cleaner than anyone thought possible.
Okay, that's a huge, niche real estate example. But here's the question for you, the listener. How does a solo entrepreneur, maybe a mid-level manager, apply this principle? How do you cut red tape when your red tape is just, self-imposed paralysis or fear?
Well, you apply the discipline. The core lesson of the Woolman Rink isn't really about construction. It's about the mandate of action. When you feel blocked by process, the executioner asks, is this rule serving me, or is it just protecting someone else's comfort zone?
Good question.
Execution demands you ignore the comfort zone and focus only on the required outcome.
And that leads us directly to the core of this entire model, discipline and control. It requires fierce control of yourself, sure, but also over your two most critical resources, money and time.
Right. Money is described in these sources as oxygen. Waste it, and you basically suffocate your project. The disciplined operator knows precisely where every penny goes, understanding that, saving 5 pennies soon leads to having $5 for leverage.
There's a brilliant specific tactical detail we found related to managing expenses here, which applies way beyond just construction.
The rule of the completed blueprint, yes. Never sign a major contract, whether it's with a builder, a software team, whatever, a marketing agency, until your plans are absolutely 100% finalized.
Why is that so critical?
Because the moment you ask for a change later, you lose all your leverage. That contractor can charge these enormous punitive fees for any adjustments because you are now relying on them, you see.
Right, you're locked in.
Exactly. Disciplined execution means protecting your downside before you commit a single dollar.
That seems like common sense, but you're right. So many businesses skip that step in the rush to just start. We're talking about disciplined preparation here.
Absolutely. And the same ruthless discipline must apply to time, which winners treat like blood, precious, limited, and never, ever to be spilled on trivialities.
And the system, let's face it, it's designed to distract you. You've got endless feeds, notifications, pointless meetings just demanding your attention. If you want to execute, you have to audit your hours and ruthlessly eliminate the waste.
Yeah, and we found sources suggesting a kind of practical mechanism for this. Keeping a time theft ledger. Document every 5-minute distraction, that quick scroll, the pointless email refresh, the tangent in a meeting.
Writing it down.
Once you see a week's worth of those 5-minute thefts totaled up, you realize just how much blood you're spilling daily. That visible data, it forces you to reclaim focus.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've talked about controlling external resources, money and time. But the sources argue the ultimate resource you control is, well, it's you. And that starts with your physical and mental preparation.
That's the concept of presence. Execution begins even before the first action, with how you show up. Presence is leverage. You walk into a room hesitant, uncertain, maybe visibly unprepared.
You've already lost.
You've already lost the initial psychological battle, exactly.
But walk in sharp, confident, composed, and half the negotiation, maybe more, is already won. Your presentation, your posture, your voice, your tone, your energy, it has to scream competence. It's that necessary first line of persuasion that clears the way for action.
You're essentially telegraphing that you're not there to ask for permission. You are there to execute a plan.
Okay, let's transition a bit into the bold strategies needed for this kind of high-level execution, starting with the philosophy of think big.
Right.
If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big.
This strategy suggests that thinking big actually requires a different kind of work, not necessarily more hours. The example given is comparing the energy needed to manage, say, 50 apartment units versus managing 1,200.
Right.
The sources suggest the administrative infrastructure, the basic headaches, they're roughly the same, but the financial returns, exponentially different. So the question is, why work just as hard for a small result?
It's about fighting that natural human tendency, maybe, to choose manageable small goals out of fear. Thinking big also means playing to people's fantasies, the biggest, the tallest, the first, the best. That kind of hyperbolic attention is a huge execution tool because it cuts through the noise.
Which brings us neatly to the next and arguably most controversial strategy, publicity as leverage. Being bold, confrontational, even deliberately controversial forces people to pay attention. It effectively generates free advertising.
Yeah, and the surprising nugget from the sources here is the idea that bad publicity can sometimes be better than no publicity at all, purely from a bottom-line perspective, because controversy sells attention.
Now, that strategy, relying on controversy, it feels highly risky today, doesn't it? Particularly in a world where reputation can be, destroyed instantly online. Are the sources arguing that any attention is good attention, or is there some kind of line?
Well, the source material seems to focus on the practical outcome. The example cited is the destruction of those two famous art sculptures before Trump Tower was built.
Yeah.
The publicity was definitely negative. Pundits were outraged.
Right, I remember that.
But that controversy drew massive, sustained media attention to the project, which then saw an upsurge in apartment sales almost immediately after. So the strategy here seems very transaction-based. If the negative attention drives sales, the executioner deems it successful, regardless of, say, the ethical cost or damage to long-term goodwill.
It's a purely transactional model then, which, modern business schools usually warn against. They tend to prioritize long-term, mutually beneficial relationships. But for immediate, high-stakes execution, this source advocates attention over affection, it seems.
That connects directly to the next crucial strategy: gaining leverage through perception. To secure the upper hand in a deal, you must have what the other person wants, or, critically, make them believe you already have it.
Yeah, this is all about managing momentum and narrative. The famous example is when the team was seeking a partnership with Holiday Inn for a major casino project. The project had barely started, but the executives, they needed to believe it was a certainty.
So the directive was clear. Make the construction site look like the busiest one in the world. They brought in extra trucks, extra workers, just doing anything, moving dirt around, stacking materials.
Anything to look busy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to create that visual impression of nonstop, overwhelming activity for the visiting executives.
And that confirmation of their existing impression that this was a massive, successful project underway, that secured the deal. So in your world, listener, that means making sure your crucial presentation looks busy and successful, even if you're maybe still waiting for one crucial piece of data. It's about controlling the narrative, making your momentum visible.
And what happens when the inevitable negative criticism hits? When you're confronted with bad press or an attack, the strategy is not to debate defensively, because that just makes the issue seem more important, right?
Instead, you're advised to smoothly shift attention to a related positive aspect. You change the ground of the conversation, don't fight on their field, instantly pivot to your strongest ground.
Okay. Moving on, this model of execution, it demands profound independence and judgment. You can't just outsource your critical decisions.
Correct. Experts are tools, they're not gods. If you solely rely on external data and formal reports, you lose your internal power, your gut feeling. True execution demands blending rigorous research with instinct. Trump is cited for relying on intuition developed by actually talking to people on the ground, taxi drivers, construction foremen.
Real people.
Yeah, rather than relying only on expensive, perhaps sanitized market surveys.
It makes sense. Business, unlike fields like law or medicine, it doesn't have a rigid science to success, does it? The sources suggest intuition, developed through constant exposure and experience, is really paramount when making those high-stakes decisions.
Now, in the spirit of a proper deep dive, we absolutely must acknowledge the critical context surrounding this material. We're analyzing the tactics presented, sure, but we also need to report on the external analysis of those tactics.
Absolutely essential.
Yeah.
And the sources provide necessary context here. Critics view some of the advice as, self-help homilies dressed up as hard-nosed strategy. Furthermore, the negotiation approach, the reliance on bluffing, exaggeration, and that fundamental win-lose mindset. It's seen as fundamentally violating modern ethical principles taught in business schools today, which prioritize long-term credibility and mutually beneficial relationships.
And, of course, we have to mention the famous authorship controversy. The book's ghostwriter later called writing it his greatest regret, alleging that the subject actually played a minimal role in the writing itself. He even suggested the work should be recategorized as fiction, due to concerns over veracity and, the exaggerated claims made about various projects.
Yeah, that perspective is crucial for anyone thinking about adopting these strategies wholesale. Execution requires strategic realism. However, regardless of authorship or the controversies surrounding the figure or the book, one principle stands utterly tall: sheer perseverance.
That's right. Many people become successful simply because they refuse to give up, even when they face a total lack of encouragement. Persistence is the ultimate equalizer. It often outlasts talent, connections, even luck sometimes.
The power of persistence is beautifully illustrated by the story of chasing a property owner for years just to buy an old building.
Right. The owner initially refused outright. Flat out no. But the strategy wasn't to debate or try to convince. It was just to keep the possibility alive. Letters were sent every few months, apparently for 3 years.
3 years of letters.
Just persistence wearing down resistance. Eventually, the company that owned the building ran into financial trouble, the management changed, and the new team, needing fast cash, finally made the deal happen.
If he had given up after the first rejection, or the 10th, that project simply wouldn't exist. That pairs perfectly with patience too, doesn't it? If a deal doesn't feel right, the price is wrong, the location is off. It pays to be patient because another opportunity will come sooner or later. Don't be desperate.
Exactly. Don't feel pressured to buy or invest just because you feel you should. Okay, so in summation, execution is the powerful bridge that turns those airy dreams into tangible empires. Vision without execution? It's ultimately just hallucination. Persuasion without execution is basically pure manipulation.
And that brings us to your challenge, the listener. We want you to engage in 3 specific acts of disciplined execution this week. Not plans, remember, but finished actions.
Okay, number 1, deliver one real result, something measurable that is completely finished, not 90% done. Get it across the line.
Number 2, cut one unnecessary cost, or find one resource to leverage other people's money, maybe their expertise or their time. Where's the waste in your day, and how can you redirect it?
And number 3, start one habit that sharply defines you daily. Maybe 10 focused pages read, 15 minutes of dedicated practice on a skill, even 5 minutes of deep reflection. Focus on those small disciplines that compound into massive advantage over time.
Because the system rewards the disciplined and, it relentlessly buries the dreamers. If you do not execute your vision, you will inevitably end up working for someone who executed theirs. The choice always is yours.